So we have an illustrious federal panel here, and Lisa Berry, the CEO of Civitas, has graciously volunteered to facilitate a discussion today. And maybe, Lisa, I'll just let you take it away.
Sure. All right, well, thanks, Jay, and thanks for having me here. Been really great to see many friends and colleagues over the last couple of days at the various related conferences in these related topics. And so I've been asked to moderate this panel on federal interoperability, progress, and promise. Just a little bit about what I do and my background here. CEO of Civitas Networks for Health, which used to be the Strategic Health Information Exchange Collaborative and the Network for Regional Healthcare Improvement. And we joined forces in October to create Civitas, which represents nearly all of the regional and statewide health information exchanges, as well as regional health improvement collaboratives, including quality improvement organizations, community health improvement organizations, all-payer claims databases, various data collaboratives. What really binds them together is that they're sort of nonprofit, multi-stakeholder, governed organizations working on using health data to improve outcomes. Many of them are also members of the eHealth Exchange, of course, and deeply involved in the community. And before Civitas, I worked at the CMS Innovation Center. So I know a little bit about what it's like for these folks here to go through and be part of meetings like this and be part of the general work at the national level on improving and advancing interoperability and exchange. So really excited to talk to them all here today. So I've got 3 folks. We did have 4. We did have a dropout, probably due to the weather, a little bit tricky out there. And so I'm just going to briefly introduce them and then give them a minute as well to talk about their own work. So we have Cindy Pan from the VA. So she works for the Department of Veterans Affairs and is one out of a cohort of multiple program managers that support the Veterans Health Information Exchange Program, which is the home of interoperability at the VA. We have Melissa Ayers from the Social Security Administration. She is a senior advisor in the Office of Disability Information Systems at Social Security Administration. And Rich Forshee at FDA. Rich is a deputy office director at the FDA Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, and he uses quantitative models to advance public health there. So thank you all for joining me and making it out. Cindy is here from San Diego, and the other 2, the 3 of us are from Maryland, so not so far to travel to get here today. So we've got a few questions, and we want to talk generally about their work in their agencies with the eHealth Exchange. So kind of my first question is just really basic. Why did you join the eHealth Exchange, and why is exchanging data via the eHealth Exchange really important to your agency and your work today? And I'll start with Cindy.
So we joined the eHealth Exchange. We've actually been a part of the organization since its beginnings as a federal initiative under the ONC, and we'd like to self-proclaim us as one of the anchor partners. Not sure if that's recognized by others, but that's what we like to say. And it is really, really important to us because of the number of veteran patients that we refer out into the community. I'm sure everybody in the room has at least a first-degree connection to somebody who is either a veteran patient or a veteran or active duty military or a family member that supports active duty. So we just have a huge outreach. We support such a huge population. Our integrated health system just requires a lot of data from the community, interaction with the community. So it is incredibly important for us to be able to exchange that data seamlessly such that our clinicians and end users that are working with our patients have more time to be able to do that, spend it, treating them as opposed to trying to retrieve data and making decisions on a holistic view of what their health looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will also say, especially with the VA and its position and various VA hospitals and various communities, many of Civitas's members at the state level are also working with their VAs in various states and communities as well. So it's really important to have that connection in the community and then also, of course, for veterans nationwide.
Yes, absolutely.
Very much so. Melissa.
So I don't know that we were necessarily one of the anchors, although I think we were soon after. But similar to the VA, SSA has a customer base that we need to provide service to as efficiently as possible. And our core mission is to serve the people that are coming in to apply for benefits. And eHealth Exchange model is our current model that allows us to streamline some of, well, really, this tends to be the translation, I think, between what SSA requires, which is a little different than what other people do, and we have this model that we've been lucky enough to build with the eHealth Exchange and Epic, where we can do some of those things more efficiently, but essentially...
Warning.
Oh, over here, sorry.
I could hear you.
Avert your gaze, please.
I could hear us already.
Do I start over? What Cindy said. Just to reiterate quickly, our current exchange model is really important in allowing us to provide expeditious service to the American people, individuals who come in to apply for benefits. SSA is a little different than a lot of other folks in our use cases, a little different than other folks, which makes us a little more finicky to work with. We've been lucky that we have this established partnership with the eHealth Exchange and with Epic, where we've been able to kind of work through some of those challenges. And we have an operating model that works pretty well. They've been patient with us, and it really has allowed that baseline for us to get to operate within this space. So that's
Great. And Rich?
Good morning, everyone. I have to start off with a disclaimer, sorry. This is an informal communication. My comments represent my best judgment, but do not bind or obligate the FDA. So that's behind me.
also that.
What Rich said for everyone, I want to be clear, these folks are here on their own recognizance.
I just need a ditto thing.
Awesome. So once again, good morning. I'm going to start by saying just a little bit about what my center and my office does, because I think we're in a little different space than the others here on the panel. So I work at the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. We're responsible for the safety and effectiveness of vaccines, blood and blood products, human cell and tissue products, and gene therapies, among other things. So we're lucky we don't have anything controversial in our space. So
Hence the disclaimer.
yes. So a big part of what we do in our office is we've stood up some large-scale post-market surveillance systems in order to monitor both the safety and the effectiveness of the products that we're responsible for. And this has been especially critical during the COVID-19 pandemic, both to look at the natural history of COVID-19, as well as to have really an unprecedented safety monitoring system put in place for the COVID-19 vaccines. And it becomes really critical for us to be able to get accurate and detailed data in order to carry out this mission. Most of the work that we do starts with health claims data. We have a number of data partners. We also work with CMS. And so we've got hundreds of millions of people that we can check to see what they've been exposed to and whether they've had any adverse events associated with that. But if we do see something that's concerning, we need to be able to get more information about what went on with that patient. And that's some of the motivation for moving into the eHealth Exchange space. The prior approach to doing this was we would send letters, faxes, emails to healthcare providers, wait weeks or months to get back the medical records before we could review them. The first use case that we're piloting with eHealth Exchange is to be able to automate that, be able to send a message out about that patient, get all of the healthcare records that are available through the eHealth Exchange, and this can be done in a matter of minutes as opposed to months that we were doing before. So that's the motivation that we have. It's going to help us supplement our public health surveillance, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on some of the other questions. So thank you.
Well, let me follow that up directly, Rich, because the next question we have is really, were there any specific reasons or unique needs that make the eHealth Exchange critical to your operations? And you just started to touch on that, so why don't you go a little bit further into the specific needs?
Yeah. So, so building on what I just said, we wanted to develop pilots that were going to help us more quickly get information on, in particular, adverse events that people might be experiencing. We want to be able to do a deep dive to understand whether it's plausibly related to some of the products that we regulate, so we can understand what actions we might need to take. So with eHealth Exchange, we thought that would be a good system for us to begin our work in terms of trying to more quickly get the information about patients that have had adverse events. And then one of the things that we hope to transition to in the future is a situation to using eHealth Exchange to help at least semi-automate the reporting of adverse events. So not just waiting until we see something and we want to get the records, but try and get systems in place that will help to alert healthcare providers that there might be an issue here that should be reported, and then get that information more quickly and more completely than we do with the current systems that are in place.
Great. Well, let me follow that up on Melissa and ask you if you can go into some of the specific reasons or the unique needs that Social Security Administration is facing that makes you want to work with eHealth Exchange.
Sure. So I think I touched on it a bit in my first reply, but basically, SSA has a particular use case where we are trying to get as much evidence as we can about our disability applicants as quickly as we can, which sounds simple, and it should be simple, but we make it hard. So I think SSA has some particular challenges with our data specifications, how we consume data, how we want to consume data. We want everything under the kitchen sink except the things that we don't want under the kitchen sink. So in kind of true government fashion, we are, like I said, a little difficult to work with in some instances, and it just takes some time and focused effort to get through those things. And we've been able to do that with this partnership, which is great because it's a model, like I said, for kind of our current setup, and it really has been transformative with respect to the impact on disability claims decisions. So similar to one of your comments, we go from being able to get the information that we need about a claim within minutes as opposed to weeks or months in some of our other channels. And it really, obviously, it benefits everybody, so I don't need to kind of go into that value proposition, but we are always under the gun when it comes to processing times. It's just kind of the nature of the game, right? And especially it kind of ebbs and flows, I think. I anticipate it just becoming, in kind of the post-COVID world, becoming even more important to be able to move on those applications as quickly as possible. So
Right. When I think about what do I know about Social Security disability applications, I know processing time.
yeah, right.
That's what I think of automatically, unfortunately.
Right, and it's very simple when you think about it. You can get, rather than snail mailing or faxing or those kinds of things that take forever, and you may or may not get it, and then it sits on somebody's desk. I mean, all of those things. It's really it's transformative in being able to get that information. The right person looks at it, is able to make the determination, and then we help the people that need help. So
Yeah, absolutely. How about you, Cindy, about the question, sort of the specific reasons, the unique needs that VA is facing?
Yeah, I want to say, I want to take a slightly different approach as to why our participation with an eHealth Exchange is really, really vital to our operations. I think first and foremost, we all know that eHealth Exchange has been around a really long time and a leader in this interoperability industry. And it allows, it's one of the few spaces where we really have a seat at the table and we're able to lean in and be able to, move the needle forward. So that's one reason it's really vital to us. Another one is that it's I don't want to say a one-stop shop, but you know, with the hub, they talked about a on-ramp to access everything, right? But even before that, eHealth Exchange had a similar model with, you know, the DRSA. It's one thing that we have to complete that allows us to connect to multiple organizations. When the DRSA comes under, you know, review or and possible revision, it is a very long process for us to herd through leadership to get that signature we need. So being able to do that and then connect to 250 plus organizations is absolutely amazing. And then it is also one of the, you know, one-stop shop kind of, where we can connect to our local and regional HIEs and do it nationally, you know, gaining access for all of our VA medical centers. This is different from our local VA medical center being a participant of their local regional HIE, but it allows all of our VA medical centers to be able to access any and all local regional HIEs that are relevant to their patient.
Yeah, definitely. And let's talk about sort of the volume of traffic. Like, where are we now? Obviously, VA's been involved for a long time, and so you probably have, I would imagine, a pretty high volume of traffic. What else can you share about the volume of the work you're doing through eHealth Exchange?
Yeah, the volume of traffic is really large. I remember during one of the coordinating committee meetings, I think there was a proposal where they said, is there any way we can get a graph where we filter out the joint HIE because you can't really see anything else because the bar graph is just off the charts. So yes, we definitely have a lot of volume. And for anyone out there that doesn't know, the VA, the DoD, and the US Coast Guard now form the federal joint HIE, so we're kind of centralized in that sense. So that also makes our numbers much larger between, you know, all of our VA medical centers and all of the military treatment facilities. It's a lot of places. But on average, we are exchanging about 60 million transactions a day, and that's across all different types of transactions, and that's aggregated across the joint HIE, the federal joint HIE. We're retrieving about 5 million documents a day for all of our patients, again, across all of the joint HIE. I will say that specific to the VHA, we retrieve we disclose about 600,000 documents to our community partners, and that affects about 170,000 unique patients, and that's on a daily basis. Wow. I do want to add the little plug that, 2.5 years ago or so, we finally were able to enable the Mission Act, which allowed us to actually disclose a lot more data on our shared patients. So that last number, the 600,000 and 170,000 unique patients, has skyrocketed. And I know that that is huge for the community who also cares for our veteran patients.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really important. Melissa, what do you, talk to us a little bit about volume. I mean, I imagine, like you said, also potentially post-COVID, we're looking at even higher volume. What does that look like for SSA?
So I'll put in a plug for the eHex dashboard. When I checked it the other day, it was great. It was wonderful to be able to just go and do that. We are looking at, for SSA, about 30 million messages exchanged annually. So that's quite a bit. And what that represents for SSA is really kind of the scope is over 200 partners with over 30,000 facilities that are participating in that 30 million. So it's quite a footprint. It's quite a footprint.
Yeah, definitely. How about you, Rich?
So ours is really different.
Sure, it's a totally different, this is like a process, like very direct use case, yeah.
Yeah, so again, a lot of the work that we're doing is centering around vaccine safety, and we have very, very high safety thresholds for our vaccines. Vaccines are given to tens or hundreds of millions of healthy people to prevent something that might happen. So we want to make sure that the risks are extremely low. And in fact, we monitor for risks at the level of 1 in 100,000, 1 in a million, or that's the kind of sensitivity that we want to have in our surveillance system. So given the environment that we're in, we have pretty small volume right now. Now, as I mentioned, if we do move to a system where we've got semi-automated reporting of adverse events, that could expand it some. But I don't anticipate us ever being near the level of volume that we've talked about so far.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about what's on your roadmap as much as you can share. Again, remember, there's only so much that these folks can share that hasn't already been publicly announced. So don't be mad if they can't go beyond what's already been publicly announced. So our next question here is really around what are the next projects that your agency plans on tackling that need that will require this access to data through eHealth Exchange? And maybe let's start with Melissa. Sorry, Melissa.
No, I mean, I think that in general, the agency is kind of redoubling our efforts in this area and really trying to take some fresh eyes at what's working, what we can do better, those sorts of things. And a lot of that is really kind of internally. You know, I do joke and say that we are prickly to work with, and we are. And what I've tried to do since transitioning into this area is to make that less so. You know, how can we become better to work with? How can we kind of assume some of our own problem solving to kind of make it more attractive to want to exchange with us? So that's, you know, kind of the overall strategy, you know, that we've been taking a look at there. I think, excuse me, in the immediate future, what we're planning to do is fully leverage our care quality connection that we've just finally gotten through the gate, which is a huge success. We're also taking a look at kind of the corners of the eHealth Exchange that we have not necessarily pursued as strongly as we had in the past. Within the agency, we've made some investments with our infrastructure to make us more flexible, to make it so that we can take in different types of data, we can meet different specifications, we can kind of solve some of our own problems rather than shoving that off onto the partner. So hopefully those efforts will kind of culminate into success. I think they will. You know, it might take time, but I do think that we're positioned to fully leverage the things that we have in a way that we haven't done in the past, I think. And then the only other thing, I know patient access has been, you know, a large topic. I don't really have lots of details, but it is something that SSA in general has tried to take a look at over the past couple of years, not necessarily specific just to data, but you know, online applications, what can a customer do on their own? And this is a natural piece to that because it doesn't really do you any good if you can do 2/3 of something yourself and then we're the brick that's pulling you down. So there's acknowledgement of that and you know, work being done in that area too. So that's exciting, I think.
And you sort of touched on it, but can you just be a little bit more specific about what your data sharing pain points are?
Sure, yeah. I would love to talk about that. So we have a list of things that we have to have to make a determination in a disability claim. And some of those things don't translate well into other use cases. So a lot of the trouble that we run into is really getting to the point where everybody understands why we need something and that it really does have a direct tie to it. And kind of conversely to that is SSA efficiently communicating what we need and why we need it. So there's two pieces of that. And then, you know, just we're victims to the kind of specification mismatch as well. So that's, you know, something that we're trying to alleviate through modernization internally. And I think the other piece of it that we really run into that may or may not be really specific to us is actually getting out there and finding partners, doing outreach, doing onboarding, you know, making our pitch for the value proposition. You know, it's a laborious task internal to SSA, so we're taking a look at that as well.
Absolutely. Cindy, what are the next projects your agency plans on tackling? What do you need in this area?
So I wouldn't say it's so much a project, but a continued focus. So our leadership is really, really big on, you know, continuing to be a high reliability organization. So an HRO for being, you know, in the VA is very, very important. And that isn't something that happens overnight, and it isn't something that we could just check the box and move on, right? So it's a mindset that we have to have. It's being hyper-vigilant on mitigating risks, because we all know, if there was a big issue down the road, that's easy to avoid, right? You could see it, it's a mountain, you're just gonna go around it. But it's never that easy, right? It's the small things, small risks that turn and snowball into something much larger that can affect us. So we have to be, again, hyper-vigilant about mitigating all of those things. In terms of our work, what that means is a lot of tedious work. So, really buckling down and doing the data quality analysis, consuming all of the data that is sent to us so that we can, backtrack and look, okay, well, we got an issue from an end user that this document doesn't look right, or it looked different last time that they pulled it, and being able to go back and compare and say, what's the change? And then have the conversation with the community organizations to say, what has changed because the documents look different? We now have an issue that wasn't present 2 weeks ago. So it's that tedious work that will continue to, put us on that path of being an HRO that's really important to us.
Got it. How about you, Rich?
So we're still at the pilot stage with
Sure.
our work with eHealth Exchange, but the vision that
So a lot to build out still.
Yes, tons to build out. At this point, we have a couple of worked examples that have been reasonably successful and suggest that there's some good things here. What the vision that we have is really to try to use systems like this in order to help us both rapidly get the information we need for adverse events that we've already learned about, so that we can explore them and evaluate them properly. And on the other side, to use the system to get better coverage of adverse events that might be happening that we're not seeing right now. So to get better coverage of all the adverse events that may be happening, and have those more rapidly reported than we're seeing now. And I think looking even further out, I do see some value in making it easier for patients to get access to all of their scattered medical records, and where that helps from our FDA perspective is they could provide a more complete report to us if they had experienced some problem that they thought might be associated with one of the products we're responsible for. So that's sort of the vision that we see that we're working to build out, but we're at the start of that journey.
And it sounds like, your potential pain points is really just getting all the information to inform any adverse events investigations, right?
Yeah.
So whether it's through the eHealth Exchange or from a patient directly or from their providers, just getting all the information to better understand it.
Yeah, and that's an issue more broadly in the surveillance programs
Sure.
that we have. And I'll give one example that I've been struggling with for 2.5 years. If you want to study the safety and effectiveness of vaccines, it really helps if you know who's been vaccinated and who hasn't.
Sure.
And we don't always know that.
Yes.
Because we get most of our information on vaccination status from health claims data. And all of us remember that during the early days of COVID-19, there were a lot of mass vaccination clinics, and not all of that information made its way back into the health claims data. We've done a lot of work with immunization information systems. These are the state and local jurisdictions to try and get better coverage of that. But that involves going jurisdiction by jurisdiction and data partner by data partner, and so that's been a slow road as well. So that's just an example that I've lived with. But the idea of having these integrated systems that we can trust and that can provide more comprehensive information more quickly will help to improve our capabilities.
Yeah, I'll just do a little side plug here. I think the eHealth Exchange is doing a great job connecting the various health information exchanges and other entities with federal agencies and others who need to quickly locate those data. Civitas is a sub-awardee in the ONC IDEAS program, which is connecting health information exchanges, IASs, and states to really make those connections better in the states. You need those data sources to be able to inform the work that you're doing, and in this case, you need eHealth Exchange to help you get to those state data resources. And so we also, at Civitas, are focusing on improving those connections within the states and the regions to hopefully better feed information here, so you don't have to go and connect to every single IAS individually, ideally. Personally, I think my first vaccine was in a clinical trial, so I don't think that ever made it into, I got to watch the progress of it through Maryland's immunization information system, and there was a lot of confusion for a long time, let's just say, before it actually got out to a format that you could understand.
And just to follow up on that, you've in your work with the IIS jurisdictions, you're probably also seeing that there's a big range of capabilities in
Oh, yeah.
IIS jurisdictions. And I will put in a personal plug. I think the IIS jurisdictions need help, and they have an important job to do, and not all of them are well resourced for that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Great. Well, I think, moving on a little bit, you talked.
Sorry, do you mind? I want to steal.
Not at all. Please, 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 jump in.
I know I wasn't asked about specifically our pain points, but I know a lot of us in the room do share similar pain points, right? Burdened clinicians, sifting through all the data, the completeness of the data quality. These are things that we all share,
Yes.
and including the VA, and those are all pain points that that our program deals with on a daily basis, as well as our end users. But there are some that I think maybe I just want to talk about at the end of the day. And one of them is the document naming. That's really, really tough for us because not to say that it doesn't affect everybody in the room and those outside of the room, but when we're talking about VA medical centers that are treating patients that are connected, and we're connected to 260 plus organizations, we can get a whole array of document naming conventions, and trying to find out what those mean is really difficult for our clinicians when they're have 15 minutes with a patient and trying to figure out what is happening. I joke sometimes. I have a good friend who's English, and when we get together, there's this period of,
What do you mean?
yes, dictionary, like playing dictionary. He'll say something, and I'm like, I don't think that's what you meant to say in the way that I interpreted it. And then I also had a conversation with another English gentleman while I was on vacation last week, and he was telling me how he was vegan, and one of the things he likes to eat is ladyfingers. And I'm like, I don't think that's the same ladyfingers that's in tiramisu, that's in our culture, and I've yet to figure out what ladyfingers means in like British English. So yeah, that just kind of adds to it, right? The document naming convention is really, really important, and that's something that we hear a lot from our end users, and I know that there are some partners here that we want to speak to see if we could get on the same page and start edging towards resolving that for our clinicians.
Yeah, that's a really important point, and something that we hear time and time again. Standards and the same language only goes so far. You need implementation guides and standardized implementation across different settings to make it actually make sense, the true semantic interoperability. And really, again, implementing things the same way is the thing that is in many cases missing, even though we're using the same standards, even though we're using the same system. So that is a universal pain point. Definitely. Well, in the interest of time, I'd like to ask you all, if anything you can share about how you're thinking about the emergence of Tefka. That's been obviously a theme today and in the previous meetings for Sequoia and for care quality. What is that looking like for you? Do you anticipate any impact? Is it how are you dealing with the forthcoming emergence of Tefka and the QHIN selections? What are you thinking about that, Cindy?
Okay.
Start with you.
So we're really excited about Tefka. We've been following it very closely, and we really believe that it's going to capitalize on the 10 plus years of work that people in this room, organizations in this room have really led the effort on. So we're very, very excited. And I think the prospect of having that streamlined efficiency, being able to query once and getting confidently getting everything, looking in every nook and cranny for that patient is amazing. And again, I don't want to say that we're unique in this, but it affects us especially that we are connected to so many different organizations and across multiple networks, and that's going to continue to expand. So the duplication of querying the same partner across different networks, I don't want to say it's more work, it's additional work. We have resources that are dedicated to trying to figure out, okay, well, when somebody reports an issue and we're trying to close the loop on that issue for the end user to ensure buying their confidence that they'll continue to use the system, trying to figure out where we got that document can sometimes be so much more difficult than it should be. Is it through this network? Is this organization connected to multiple places? Are we querying them through multiple places? So being able to query once and knowing that it's going through a hierarchy of QHINs and looking for all the data will be awesome. And I will say for my team specifically, the bread and butter of our work, in addition to connecting to the community, is resolving those end user reported issues. And I think having one process that we get really good at, again, will be so helpful. Again, rather than saying, okay, with this organization, what is our process? With this network, what is our process? With this, workflow architecture, what is our process? It's hopefully one day going to be the same standard process to troubleshoot everything. And I will say that it seems far down the road, right? But everything feels impossible until it is possible. I do yoga, and I always say, my leg is never going to go in that direction, And then one day it does, and then it doesn't feel so impossible anymore. So, I have hope.
You definitely need that persistence working in the federal government. That is a very, very important personality characteristic to be a federal employee, so that's great.
You're
How about you, Melissa, in terms of how you're thinking about Tefka?
I think Cindy summed it up. I think that we are cautiously optimistic. I think that the opportunity that it presents is very exciting for all the reasons that Cindy itemized there. SSA a lot of times is wait and see agency. We kind of wait and see. We're not, So I think we're excited to be a part of it, and the discussions leading up to the agreement. And I think it was valuable for us to participate in those discussions and contribute there. So I think it presents opportunities that we're excited about. We'll see how it goes.
Definitely. So Rich, I have kind of a two-parter for you. I know obviously you're just getting kicked off with pilots for eHealth Exchange. So any comments you want to make on how you're viewing Tefka, if at all? And then also, what the public health aspect of this looks like for you. Obviously, FDA is involved deeply in public health activities, as you just explained, and how will the better, increased, faster, quicker access to health data really help your public health activities?
Well, we're very supportive of Tefka for some of the reasons that have already been mentioned here. On the public health side, as I've said a couple of times now, being able to quickly learn about potential adverse events so that we can investigate them thoroughly will help us do our job better. And Tefka, it seems like it's going to get us moving along that path where we can get the data that we need to evaluate these potential events more quickly. And we also think that it is going to help us to see some things we're missing right now. We think there might be adverse events out there that we should know about and we should be investigating. And we think as we get more interoperability, that it's going to be easier for us to see some of those events. So that's how I see it tying into our public health mission.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, folks can start thinking about questions they might have. I'm going to ask one additional question and ask my panelists to share anything else you'd like to share. Generally speaking, what are you, anything you can share, anything you're hoping that eHealth Exchange takes on next, beyond obviously this massive effort to potentially become a QHIN and be part of the Tefka landscape, beyond that, other use cases, other approaches you'd like eHealth Exchange to take in the future, and you all can think about any questions you have while they answer these questions.
Image exchange. I think everybody wants that. It's, I've been working in this program with the VA for probably about 8 years now, starting directly with the VA medical centers, directly kind of boots on the ground. And I would get asked that question all the time from my clinician stakeholders, what about images? What about images? How do we get that? And I know that it hasn't been resolved yet. I have, again, hope that this group will be able to get to that point one day. And if eHealth Exchange can help lead that effort in any way, shape, or form, I think that it is a gap in our industry that has a lot of opportunity.
So what does it mean today with the lack of image exchange? So you're getting your health data and then you have this major gap in your workflow. Is that what it looks like?
Yeah, exactly. And then I think not only are our end users, as in our clinicians, unable to see the whole picture, but sometimes that also means that our veteran patients are undergoing unnecessary medical procedures again. That not only frustrates them, it's time, it's money for us and community and the nation. So I think there's a lot of I guess loss of efficiency there. So something we'd really like to see tackled.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rich, in terms of use cases, obviously, as we've already discussed, you're still building out beyond pilots, but I imagine things in the area of research and clinical trials. What else would be interesting and useful for you for eHealth Exchange to build out?
So I think there's already a pretty ambitious plan for eHealth, and the current goals are going to support a lot of our mission. So I think that's all I really have to say regarding that. I think the current plan is going to be helpful for our
Start with what's in front of you.
Yep.
Got it. And Melissa, anything you want to share about this or anything else about your work you'd like to share with the audience?
Nothing really too far down the line. I do think that some of the things that are going on right now, we're kind of diving into, the RLS is especially interesting right now to us and kind of those opportunities. And it's really interesting to understand kind of the methodology there, and that is helpful for us, trying to solve some of the same problems and things like that. So I think that, just in general, we are interested in what's happening now, and in the immediate future, we see ourselves in that work, and that's good for now.
Great. All right, any questions from the audience for the panel? I got one right over there. Go for it.
Hi, Troy Kaji from Contra Costa. I actually have comments for all three of you. And one of them is, the other day we had a keynoter from the Office of Burden Reduction and Health Informatics.
Dr. Green.
But in my experience, it's been your agencies that have done that, actually. I remember when you got that act of Congress passed in the VA that actually changed it from an opt-in to an opt-out, and that has really increased our match rate. We were just going crazy trying to get the consent signed before that. So this is all a bunch of thank yous. So anyway, for the SSA, you should know you were the original business case that I could sell this to my operational leaders to say, I mean, what IT purchase do we have that I could say it's going to actually be net zero cost because we'll get some income out of this? And that's continued to be true every year. But aside from that, the acceleration of the process for disability determinations has a huge impact, especially on our homeless patients as a safety net public sector entity. And to see people go from unhoused to housed, actually, because they've gotten their income stream and their medical coverage has been huge. And so thank you for doing that. I think it's like a no-brainer to do that. And for the FDA, I'm looking forward to actually doing this FHIR R4 project. And that will help, see, that's putting the FHIR R4 in a language that my pharmacy director can understand in terms of burden reduction of reporting for her staff. And all of us have, so many open job positions through this pandemic, short on every classification of staff, including pharmacists, to do this. So anyway, thank you for making the use case that I could sell to my organization.
And I just took a mental note that for all future presentations that I ever do, I'm
thank
going
you.
to plant Dr.
Yes,
Kaji
I-
in the audience and limit the time so that he's the only one that could get the mic.
Perfect. That's all the time we have for questions. Other questions from the audience? Anything else to add? The actual only question. There you go.
We wrapped it up for us. That's good.
Anybody else? Anything else you all want to share about your work?
Oh, we have a gentleman in
Oh,
the front.
go ahead. Zach?
So you mentioned document title is one of the things that you want to have as a better, perhaps, implementation guide on existing standards. What's the next pain point? What's after that? What's other metadata or things that we can do around the content to help make it much more consumable within the provider or their staff's workflow?
That's a good question. I think in addition, that's just like general data quality. I mentioned document titles because that's something that we, like my team has been especially tackling. But I think general data usability and data quality and the completeness of the data within the documents is something that our team focuses on. So as mentioned earlier during my intro, we, our program is made up of a number of program managers. We have another pillar that has a team dedicated to data quality and focused on reviewing the documents that come in from our community and analyzing that on an organizational basis to be able to go back to them and say, hey, this is what we're seeing, and it's making really difficult for our consumers and our clinicians, and they are clinical staff, they have a clinical background, to be able to consume or have context when consuming. So I think that will also be a continued effort, having those conversations. And then, of course, it's more of a carrot than a stick. We don't really have the stick to be able to say you need to make these changes, but hopefully bringing that information to light and noticing that there are these gaps. All the organizations here really just want the best for the patient and will make a priority to make those changes in the documents and the issues that we see.
Right, it's certainly possible that there is this confluence of new and forthcoming regulations that maybe don't have the biggest sticks. They have they're just kind of pushing us forward slowly, but they are starting to converge, and they will touch all of your work in different ways. They might not directly touch the VA or the VHA, but they will touch more and more the community providers that will hopefully start to be more conformant and follow standardized implementation guides. One of my questions for Dr. Green yesterday or the day before was really, how can we, move forward beyond sort of optional adherence to implementation guides? And so I will always sort of promote that we should start moving more towards getting folks on the same implementation guides and really conforming to the same standards, but that will be a process over time.
Yeah, it really is a dagger to the heart sometimes when you're trying to resolve something for an end user that says, hey, I'm looking for this. And we, speak with an organization, and they say we don't provide that because it's not required.
Right.
And that's just
What if you did it because it's the right thing
Right.
to do? Right.
try to
about that.
inspire them. But yeah, that's always a difficult response to relay to somebody where you're trying to say, hey, regularly use this product or this, electronic form of exchange.
Yeah, it's really tough. Anything to add?
No, I don't have anything to add.
Any other questions from the audience? Do we have another question?
I'm Matt Eisenberg, Stanford Healthcare. I'm going to try and channel Troy. The Mission Act was great. I can't say how many times I went to ONC meetings to say, let's just figure this out, and that's been a big change. Stanford, I think, passed 100,000 successful SSA, I think, recently, and a big plug there. Also, the metrics that we have, working with our vendor, working with you to drive match rates has been really remarkable over the last few years. The question I have for the groups, and I'm no expert here, is the work that we're going to do as we add around directories. The SSA experience was the first place where we kind of had to figure out who is Stanford Healthcare? What are our sites of care? How would a patient or a provider consider, a Stanford facility? And we have the facility list that we update now every 6 months. We've learned a lot. I wonder if each of you have thought about how, as we move towards directory management, how that will affect your organizations? Are there opportunities there? Are there things we can learn from that experience?
Yes. My ears peeked up when we first started talking about that. Facility lists are one of the banes of our collective existence in ODIS. It's tough because specific to our use case, you have an individual coming in, they're sick, they need help, they maybe don't have the best notes of where they were and who they saw, and it is really difficult to know that there is information out there that could help this person get the help that they need, but we have these hurdles in place because we can't find that location. And it is, talk about pain points. And it seems like such a simple thing that is just ridiculously not simple and just such a barrier. So I am excited, anything that we can do to make that better, to help individuals. Like I said, it ties back to RLS and those sorts of things is to kind of take that burden off of the individual, because the last thing you want to do when you've just been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer is to come in and hand over your Rolodex. I mean, we should, as an agency and kind of collectively as the government, we should make it easier for people. And I'm hopeful that we see some benefits there. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, and I'm assuming most folks understand the context here, but CMS put out a provider directory RFI that closed a few days ago. Many folks in the community responded and gave them sort of perspective on what that looks like and what their perspectives are. I'm sure between federal agencies there are also conversations as well, but it'll be very interesting to see the direction that the CMS provider directory RFI, the proposal takes. Certainly not very straightforward, right? Saying that, should they create a national provider directory with the information they have for CMS providers? It could certainly bring down the costs and improve the accuracy of that work. Anything else to add on provider directory? I'm sure it's a similar question for you, a similar issue as well.
Yeah, very similar. It does seem like it would be very, very easy, right? I mean, I can go onto the National VA website and be able to plug in my zip code and find any facilities that are by me, but somehow making that transition to a national directory, or for some reason it doesn't translate. And this is one of those things where I will say kind of do as I say, not as I do. We see it when other organizations have, say, like a hub address, a central address for their headquarters, and we're like, dang, that makes it really hard for us to be able to do this, that, and the other. And I know that sometimes, depending on where you look, we are guilty of that as well. I'm really hoping that with, if the national directory does come to fruition, it's something that will force the hands of all these organizations, again, for the benefit of our end users and patients, but will also force our hand to be able to commit to that.
Great. All right, we are almost out of time. I want to join me in thanking the panelists today for joining us. And I'm going to pass it over to our colleagues at InterSystems and Dr. Tripathi, sounds like. Thank you, everyone.